The 9,999th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Iraq, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Turkey to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Mr. Geir Pedersen, Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Syria. Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. And Ms. Majd Chourbaji, Civil Society Representative. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Mr. Geir Pedersen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me welcome you, Ambassador Ibrahim al-Olabi, in your new role as the permanent representative of Syria to the United Nations in New York. I wish you well in these historic times. Let me start with a point that bears repeating, because it is easy to forget. The interim authorities in Damascus are grappling with a massive legacy of war and autocracy. They have inherited not just the ruins of shattered buildings, but the deeper wreckage of a battered social fabric, decayed institutions, and a hollowed-out economy. Syria urgently requires international material assistance on a scale commensurate with its needs and ambition. We need to see the private sector's footprint back in Syria, including through nurturing Syria's domestic private sector to ensure that what exists survives and thrives. To achieve this will require more support from the region and the wider international community, and sustained sanctions and export control relief, reassurances to banks and companies, and an accelerated path of domestic reforms. It also, of course, requires political stability. Foreign Minister al-Chourbaji underlined to me when I met him recently in Damascus how vital international support is for Syria, as well as strongly calling for an end to foreign intervention. And I strongly echo this call. Mr. President, regrettably, the specter of external interference continues to loom large. This month has seen further intervention by Israel, including Syrian state media reporting an incident of Israeli killing of several Syrian soldiers, and an Israeli command landing south of Damascus, as well as further strikes in early September. Mr. President, this kind of external intervention is unacceptable and must stop. We must insist on the full respect for Syria's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, and that any security concerns are addressed based on international law, the 1974 agreement, and diplomatic dialogue. I hope that the meetings between Syria and Israel can lead to concrete results to bring about de-escalation and stability. Mr. President, in Sweden, the ceasefire announced by the Syrian authorities on 18 July has largely held. I continue to welcome the joint efforts of the United States and Jordan with Syria to address the crisis, recently embodied in the comprehensive joint statement on 16 September, containing a roadmap with several important and positive elements, including on accountability, humanitarian and commercial access, the restoration of services, reconstruction, detainees, security measures, integration and reconciliation. However, a statement from a committee in Sweden aligned with Sheikh Hikmet al-Hijri rejected the statement and spoke of self-determination through self-administration or secession. Mr. President, it is absolutely vital that solutions are found that both safeguard the sovereignty, unity, independence and territorial integrity of Syria and addresses the legitimate and understandable fears among the Druze community about their safety, human rights and political future within Syria, and that the state acts only as a protector and is not seen as a threat. Given the deep distrust and polarization, the situation needs confidence building measures and continued dialogue and diplomatic support. We have made clear our readiness to be helpful in this regard. I do wish to highlight that the 16 September statement includes a call by the Syrian government for the United Nations Commission of Inquiry to investigate the July events. This is a welcome opportunity for the existing and encouraging cooperation between the authorities and the United Nations on these issues to further develop. Mr. President, I also continue to encourage the publication of the conclusions of the National Committee for Investigation and Fact-Finding into the coastal events in March, and to see follow-up steps being taken. Both regarding the coast and Sweden, the Syrian public needs to see that abuses are both acknowledged and addressed in accordance with international standards and the Constitutional Declaration, so that all citizens and communities in Syria can develop confidence that there will be neither recurrence nor impunity. An example of the sensitivity of justice-related issues are recent events in Samaria, a predominantly Alawite area of Damascus, historically inhabited by families and relatives of former army personnel. In August, an armed group affiliated with the security forces of the interim authorities reportedly conducted a series of house raids there in the context of alleged eviction orders, with reports of violence and looting. I welcome that the tension in the neighborhood has abated with the intervention of the interim authorities themselves. But, Mr. President, and this is important, complex issues related to housing, land and property and to transitional justice need to be addressed with care, prioritizing the protection of civilians based on the rule of law and in line with international standards. My recent visit to Damascus also further cemented my conviction of the centrality of transitional justice to the success of the entire political transition. We reiterate the readiness of the United Nations to support the Syrian National Commissions on Transitional Justice and Missing Persons and to coordinate international assistance. Mr. President, on the Northeast, efforts continue to move forward with implementing the 10th of March agreement. We welcome the recent contacts between the interim authorities and the SDF and the exchanges on the key issues, including the critical question of military and security integration, and also a dialogue on political aspects and confidence-building measures. The fact that channels are active between the parties is positive, even if the challenges are very real. And we have had detailed discussions with the parties as they seek to find the path forward. Our messages to both is the same. This will require bold moves and genuine compromise. In areas under the control of the interim authorities, security challenges continue with immense challenges we faced on security sector reform, on disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, and on the issue of foreign fighters too. Nor has the scores of terrorism faded. ISIL cells and extremist violence continue to threaten the fragile shoots of recovery. But let me also appeal to Member States to heighten engagement on repatriation of their nationals in al-Hol and underline that the United Nations is ready to offer guidance and support in line with international human rights law and other applicable standards. Mr. President, Syria is without a legislature, and while regulatory authority can be exercised via presidential decree, the establishment of a credible interim legislative body is an important step so that urgent areas of reform during the transition can be addressed. In this regard, the preparation for the indirect elections of 2/3 of the members of an interim People's Assembly are now well on the way, but no date has yet been formally announced. It is important that this process follows realistic timelines and is not rushed. While these indirect elections and also the appointment of the remaining 1/3 by the President are unique arrangements that reflect the transition's exceptional circumstances, transparency and broad inclusion, including the meaningful participation of women and the representation of all communities, will be essential to confer legitimacy. This must not be an exercise in rewarding loyalty, but in ensuring genuine representation and embracing difference. We recognize that there are major challenges in areas where disputes remain between the central authorities and areas outside their control. And that is why we have counseled caution and giving more space and time before taking irreversible steps. Equally, it is vital that all parts of Syrian society step forward and engage with the electoral process. This is a two-sided equation. The interim authorities have told me in the past that they view the People's Assembly as a chance to make the institutions overseeing the transition more inclusive than they have been until now. It is vital that this is what is happening in practice. Without genuine agreements with key stakeholders, the new assembly may start to function and the transitional process may continue, but critical voices could find themselves excluded. And this could flow through the subsequent steps of transition, including the shaping of a new constitution. Mr. President, let me also stress that in addition to our extensive engagement with the interim authorities and other parties, I and my office continue to meet with civil society and community representatives from all parts of Syria, inside and outside the country. Many share the tremendous sense of dynamism and opportunity in this current historic moment. Others express fears about a shrinking civil space, insufficient efforts on meaningful inclusion, and a rise in hate speech and communal tension. And Syrian women continue to share their own efforts to document violations against other Syrian women from across Syria. Violence against women remains a significant barrier to their engagement in public life, restricting further their ability to play consequential and equal roles and highlighting issues of public policy that the transition needs to consider from the perspective of women. Mr. President, to conclude, the Syrian interim authorities and the Syrian people are attempting a transition in the face of challenges and realities as complex and difficult as have been faced almost anywhere. And viewed by that standard at least, we can point to remarkable changes in a short period of time. But equally, wider experience tells us that many political transitions in modern history have, alas, not been successful, that the key determinant of success have been genuine inclusion. Let me remind you all, we are speaking of a process of political transition over 5 years. Key steps ahead, particularly the new constitution, and that process of forming that new constitution, a free and fair election, but also other processes, will only succeed if all communities and critical groups are inside the tent in shaping the transition in Syria. The international community must support Syria and robustly stand against foreign intervention, but equally, the success of the transition will above all rest on the state acting as a state for all, not just in word, but also in deed, and the forging of genuine Syrian consensus, and as enabling all Syrians to voice their views, including their fears and political dissent, and to find genuine representation in the political transition. If this central challenge is mishandled, the consequences could be dire. Syria may find itself indefinitely gridlocked, unable to heal or rebuild, and at worst, slipping into fresh waves of strife and external intervention. This scenario is in nobody's interest, and this transition simply cannot fail. And I remain convinced that if the challenges are well handled and met with genuine negotiation and bold compromise, unity is within reach, and success against the odds is indeed possible. In this light, it was particularly reassuring to hear President Shara affirm that only dialogue, not force, can unite Syria. And as you know, he will be in New York next week for the high-level segment of the General Assembly, the first Syrian president to do so since 1967. Mr. President, we look forward to continue working with the Syrian authorities and Syrian partners to realize the promise of the commitments the authorities have made and to realize the promise of Resolution 2254. The United Nations stands ready to support efforts on all fronts. The journey must be Syrian-led and Syrian-owned, but let it be collective, courageous, and above all, inclusive. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Pedersen for his briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Tom Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as ever, Special Envoy Pedersen has set out compellingly the political stakes and the case for success against the odds. A warm welcome to the new permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic. Your appointment comes at a critical time for Syria. Ahlan wa sahlan. As I told the Council last month, the international community has been resolute about the need to sustain momentum in support of recovery and hope for the people of Syria. The General Assembly High-Level Week, including this historic visit, will be a critical moment. In advance, I propose to take a step back and reflect on where we are on the humanitarian effort, what actions the UN and our humanitarian partners have been taking, and what we need from you to do more. Despite the profound changes underway in Syria and the opportunities that these have generated, Syria remains by any metric one of the largest humanitarian emergencies globally. More than 70% of the population still need some form of humanitarian aid. More than 9 million people are acutely food insecure, and some 7 million people are displaced internally. More than 4 million are refugees in neighboring countries. But let me share 3 positives. Firstly, thanks to the more collaborative, practical engagement that we have with the authorities in Damascus and beyond, we can now get aid where it's needed, within the country, much more easily than under the former regime. Movements that last year would have required lengthy, onerous navigation of front lines are now happening routinely. With the consent of the Syrian interim authorities, aid dispatched from Turkey supports activities throughout the country. So there are some communities in Syria that have started to receive UN support for the first time in years. Secondly, we've adapted our structures to the new context. Over 6 months, we've shifted to a much more efficient coordination model based in Damascus, under the leadership of the Humanitarian Coordinator, with subnational hubs. Thirdly, the easing of unilateral sanctions is removing hurdles to the reconstruction work, and that will bring down the humanitarian needs further. More carve-outs, including for more development activities, will be welcome. Through these efforts, and despite severe reductions in funding, the UN and our partners are now getting critical humanitarian assistance to nearly 3.5 million people across Syria, on average every month. That's a 25% increase on this time last year. So we're getting life-saving help to displaced people and other vulnerable communities, food for 1 million people, subsidized bread for 2 million more each month, medical procedures for 2 million each month, support for the public health surveillance system, and a national immunization program that reached over 1.7 million children under the age of 5. We are also providing basic support like water trucking, shelter, healthcare to people, largely women and children, in displacement camps in the north, including Al-Hol and Al-Roj. We are prioritizing emergency response as needed. Following the escalation in violence in the south, we've now delivered assistance to over 430,000 people per month in Asweda, Dara, and rural Damascus. We continue delivering aid to Asweda through convoys organized with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. And while we're still navigating a tense security environment there, our deliveries and staff movements have become more regular over the last month, now using the reopened highway from Damascus. In fact, our team are on the ground there today, and we are now reaching most of our target population in the south. I join the Special Envoy in welcoming the roadmap agreement announced this week by Syria, Jordan, and the US. Our team in Damascus will continue to coordinate with authorities on sustaining and expanding the flow of aid. I hope this also lays the groundwork for further stabilization that facilitates full resumption of commercial routes to Asweda and, very importantly, functioning markets. These corridors are essential to maintain the flow of goods, stabilize markets, and reduce the reliance on humanitarian aid. At the same time, we are also working alongside authorities to prioritize more sustainable interventions throughout the country that strengthen institutional capacities. WHO, UNICEF, and partners are rehabilitating hospitals and health centers throughout the country, supporting the transition to the Syrian interim authorities. UNICEF and partners are rehabilitating water stations, wells, sewer networks to ensure reliable access to clean and safe water. WFP, FAO, and partners are working with national authorities to strengthen social safety nets, support rehabilitation of critical irrigation infrastructure, and of the bread value chain to ensure the continuous production of fresh bread. And as I mentioned when I briefed the Council from Damascus in December, Syria's women continue to have a vital, indispensable role in delivering humanitarian assistance and supporting Syria's recovery. And I look forward to hearing more on this theme from Ms. Chourbaji. Mr. President, despite this progress, I warn again that we risk missing a rare opportunity for the people of Syria. Our humanitarian appeal this year is only 18% funded, meaning we can reach just a fraction of those in need. And just when organizations are seeking to expand their operations and have the opportunity to work more efficiently, they are instead forced to cut programs, reduce support, lose staff. Hospitals, communities, safe spaces for women and girls have been closed as a consequence of funding cuts, exacerbating protection risks, including of more early marriage and gender-based violence. And while announcements of investment agreements are encouraging, tangible, targeted development projects are still slow to materialize. Now, this real but fragile opportunity that we have is especially stark when we consider the millions of Syrians who have been uprooted by years of conflict. Since December, and their number has gone up this morning, over 900,000 refugees and 1.9 million people displaced internally have now returned to their home areas. And we're working with them to help them meet basic needs, rebuild damaged homes, build livelihoods, clear munitions. As one example, in June, July, 305 families with urgent medical needs voluntarily departed Al-Hol camp for Raqqa, Aleppo and Homs governorates. Several UN agencies supported the organization of that movement and support upon arrival, dignity kits for women and girls, solar lights, other household items and ready-to-eat meals. But without more funding, those efforts will fall short, threatening the sustainability of these returns. The shift from the warmer summer months to the biting cold of winter adds to the urgency. Now, according to UNHCR, about 18% of Syrian refugees in the region plan to return to Syria in the next year. And that's a major increase from this time last year, but it's fewer than earlier in the year. And among the key barriers cited by those surveyed are lack of housing, access to livelihoods and employment, and security concerns. So we need to make those priorities. Mr. President, our resident and humanitarian coordinator in Damascus, Mr. Adam Abdelmullah, concluded his term last week, and in his parting remarks, he recognized the difficulties that still lie ahead, but emphasized his optimism, grounded in the strength and resilience of the Syrian people. This will require our collective, active, sustained support. This time next year, I would dearly love to report that we are substantially scaling down our emergency humanitarian operations in Syria. Not because funding cuts have forced our hand, but because the international community has made the necessary investments in Syria's future and in Syrian leadership. So let me conclude by reiterating my key asks that could help us get to that point. First, preserve stability. Only your consistent, sustained engagement to prevent renewed violence can create the conditions for genuine recovery. Second, fund the humanitarian response. Help us capitalize on access to surge more support in the coming months and save more lives and help more Syrians return home. And third, enable Syrian-led recovery. Translate these encouraging pledges into concrete investment and expand support for large-scale recovery, reconstruction, development, creating livelihoods, rebuilding homes, restoring essential services, and ultimately restoring hope for Syrians, but also, and as we prepare for one of the most consequential UN high-level weeks in a generation, for all of us who believe that diplomacy has not lost its value and its vigor. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Fletcher for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Majd Chourbaji.
أصحاب السعادة، السيدات والسادة أعضاء المجلس الموقر. اسمي مجد شربجي، أنا رائدة أعمال سورية ومديرة منظمة بصمات غير الحكومية وناشطة مدنية في مجال الحوار السلمي. أستهل كلمتي بالتعبير عن امتناني لهذه الفرصة وبالشكر الخاص إلى بعثة جمهورية كوريا لدى الأمم المتحدة على دعوتها الكريمة، وإلى المنتدى السوري على جهوده الدؤوبة في تمكيني من الحضور بينكم اليوم. ويشرفني أن أكون اليوم معكم كأحد ممثلات المرأة السورية التي دفعت أثقل الأثمان في سبيل الحرية والكرامة، ولكي أعكس دورها الأساسي ضمن المجتمع المدني ومجتمع الأعمال في سوريا. السيدات والسادة، لقد تحررت سوريا من قبضة الاستبداد، من نظام مارس على شعبه أبشع صور القمع، قتلاً وتعذيباً وإهانة وتشريداً. واليوم لا يخفي السوريون سعادتهم الغامرة بانتهاء هذا الكابوس، لكن القلق يرافقهم في كل لحظة. هل سننجح في العبور بسلام إلى مرحلة انتقالية راسخة؟ وإني إذ أتحدث إليكم أحمل معي أصوات أكثر من 500,000 شهيد، وما يقارب 200,000 مختف قسراً، و14 مليون لاجئ ونازح قسراً، أكثر من نصفهم مهجرون داخل سوريا. إن القضية السورية لم تطوى بعد، ولن تطوى إلا بتحقق العدالة. وفي هذا السياق أود أن أعبر عن خالص التعازي لأرواح المدنيين الذين سقطوا في الأحداث المأساوية والعنيفة الذي شهدناها هذا العام، وأؤكد أن الألم واحد، وأن العدالة الانتقالية الشفافة والشاملة هي الطريق الوحيد لبناء انتقال سياسي جامع يعيد الثقة بين السوريين ويضمن عدم تكرار المأساة. وإذ ندرك أن هذه المرحلة دقيقة، فإن أي إخفاق فيها قد يبدد التضحيات الهائلة التي بذلها شعبنا. لذلك التزامنا كسوريين اليوم ثابت وواضح: إنجاح الانتقال السياسي وبناء دولة عادلة ديمقراطية مبنية على حقوق المواطنة دون تمييز لا عودة فيها إلى الاستبداد. يشرفني أن أنتمي إلى مدينة دارية، مهد الثورة السورية، تلك المدينة التي كسرت جدار الخوف ورفعت وردة في وجه الرصاص. كانت مظاهرة الورود في دارية رسالة سلمية واضحة: أن حقنا في الحرية لن ينتزع بالعنف. وحقاً أفخر أني ابنة دارية التي لم تسمح لأصوات التطرف والعنف الطائفي أن تمتد لها أو أن تستخدم أراضيها للاعتداء على الأبرياء في الضواحي المحيطة بها. لكن عندما سقط أول متظاهر سلمي برصاص النظام، كان ذلك خطنا الأحمر الذي لم نمتلك طرف تجاوزه أو القبول بتسوية بشأنه. لذا قطعنا عهداً أن من تجاوز هذا الخط ومن أمر بقتل الأبرياء لن يفلت من المساءلة. من هنا جاءت قوتنا. لا أحد يستطيع كسر إرادة شعب، لكننا أيضاً لن نقبل أن يطوى ملف العدالة. لقد انتصرنا بالحرية، وسنكمل انتصارنا بمحاسبة المجرمين وضمان عدم تكرار المأساة. اعتقلت مع كثيرين وتعرضت للتعذيب وقضيت 7 أشهر في السجن. خرجت إلى فضاء الحرية، لكن الآلاف ومن بينهم زوجي عبد الرحمن كمون وإخوته دفعوا حياتهم ثمناً لصوت صدح بالسلام. دام اعتقالي 7 أشهر، ذاقت خلالها نفسي مرارة التعذيب، لكني تمسكت بإنسانيتي ورفضت أن أتحول إلى نسخة من جلادي. حتى خلف القضبان واصلت الإيمان بسلمية ثورتنا. قدت إضراباً عن الطعام انتهى بالإفراج عن 83 معتقلة، ونشرت الوعي بين السجينات عن المواطنة والسياسة والعدالة الانتقالية. لقد علمتني التجربة أن قوة الإنسان لا تقاس بقدرته على الصراخ أو الانتقام، بل بقدرته على الصمود والتمسك بالعدالة والرحمة في أصعب الظروف. بعد خروجي من السجن ونزوحي إلى لبنان، وصلت رسالتي في تمكين المرأة السورية على المستويات الفكرية والاقتصادية والسياسية. مئات النساء وجدن فرصاً جديدة بفضل مبادرات صغيرة للمجتمع المدني. مما يثبت أنه عندما تنهض المرأة ينهض المجتمع كله. لقد أيقنت أن التغيير ممكن دائماً مهما كانت الظروف قاسية، واليوم تقع على عاتق الدولة السورية الوليدة مسؤولية أن تمنح المجتمع والمرأة خصوصاً الأولوية في استعادة ما فقد وتحقيق حياة كريمة تليق بالسوريين. وإذ أؤكد أن إعادة البناء هي ملكية وطنية في جوهرها، فإنني أدعو المجتمع الدولي إلى مساندة الدولة السورية الجديدة لتمكينها من النجاح في هذا المسار. أصحاب السعادة، رغم سقوط النظام الاستبدادي ما زالت التحديات جسيمة. 16 مليون ونصف سوري بحاجة إلى المساعدة الإنسانية. أكثر من نصف السكان يعانون من انعدام الأمن الغذائي، وملايين اللاجئين لا يملكون شروط العودة الآمنة والكريمة. فيما لا نزال نعاني التمييز والمعاملة السيئة على المراكز الحدودية وفي السفارات والمطارات. أما الاقتصاد فقد خلف لنا النظام البائد إرثاً من الفساد والمحسوبية وغياب الشفافية، مما قوض إمكانيات التنمية. إن إعادة الإعمار لا يمكن أن تكون مجرد إسمنت وحجارة، بل منظومة قيم جديدة قائمة على الشفافية والمساءلة حتى لا نكرر ممارسات الماضي. أصحاب السعادة، تعلمون جميعاً أن الأمم المتحدة تواجه دائماً معضلة كبرى: التوازن بين مبدأ السيادة وواجب حماية الشعوب. وهنا أذكر أن ميثاق الأمم المتحدة بدأ ب نحن الشعوب ولم يبدأ ب نحن الحكومات، وهذا يجب أن يكون البوصلة التي توجه عمل المنظمة الأممية. وانطلاقاً من ذلك فإني أدعوكم أعضاء دائمين وغير دائمين في هذا المجلس الموقر إلى منع أي محاولات لزعزعة أمن سوريا واستقرارها، لإتاحة المجال لجهود المجتمع المدني والمجتمع الدولي أن تترسخ وتثمر، مع التأكد من دعم مسار الانتقال السياسي في بلدي الحبيب، وضمان أن تكون بقيادة وملكية سورية بالكامل. كما أوجه نداءً إلى المجتمع الدولي عبر هذا المجلس الموقر لتكثيف الجهود في بناء القدرات الوطنية وتوسيع فرص دعم التعليم النوعي، لأن التعليم هو السد الحقيقي أمام عودة أي صراع طائفي أو عنف مستقبلي. التعليم ثم التعليم ثم التعليم، لأنه الضمان الأفضل لمستقبل أبنائنا. كذلك أغتنم هذه الفرصة لدعوة حكومتي لأن تكون عملية الانتقال السياسي شاملة، تضمن مشاركة النساء وجميع مكونات الشعب السوري الدينية والعرقية على قدم المساواة في صنع القرار، مع إعطاء الأولوية لإصلاح المؤسسات السورية الحكومية والمدنية، وتعزيز دور المرأة اقتصادياً عبر التدريب والائتمان وحاضنات الأعمال والشراكات التنموية، وضمان تنسيق الاستثمارات والدعم الدولي ليصب في التنمية المستدامة وبناء المؤسسات الديمقراطية. كما أدعو حكومتي لأن تتحلى بالشفافية الكاملة في تواصلها مع المواطنين، وأن تعلن خططها بوضوح، وأن تضمن أن تكون العدالة الانتقالية مساراً للإنصاف والمصالحة، لا للانتقام أو الإقصاء. وأشجعها على الاستعانة بخبرات السوريين في الداخل والخارج ممن يمتلكون المعرفة والقدرة ليضعوا خبراتهم في خدمة الدولة الجديدة. أصحاب السعادة، لقد تحررنا من الاستبداد، وهذه فرحتنا الكبرى، لكن نجاح الانتقال هو رهاننا الأكبر. إننا اليوم أمام لحظة تاريخية فارقة، لنتشارك المسؤولية ولنضمن منح السوريين فرصة العيش بكرامة، لا لمجرد البقاء بل للنهوض وإعادة بناء وطن يستحقونه. وشكراً لكم.
I thank Ms. Chourbaji for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank Special Envoy Pedersen and Undersecretary General Fletcher for their briefings. Let me also thank you, Ms. Chourbaji, not only for your statement, but also for your tireless activism and advocacy for women in Syria. I also welcome the participation of the new permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic in today's meeting. Welcome to the Council. Ahla wa sahla. Mr. President, as we reflect on the past 9 months in Syria, it is clear that much progress has been made. Syria is a very different country than before December 8. Much remains to be done, but it has made significant strides for its people, its stability, and its future. We look forward to President al-Assad's participation in the General Assembly next week, which we hope will mark the new beginning of a new and stronger relationship between Syria and the United Nations, a relationship which supports a new framework for the UN's presence in the country. Mr. President, in this spirit, allow me to focus on 3 core areas. First, priority must be given to implementing an inclusive and transparent political process in line with Resolution 2254. We hope that the selection of candidates to the People's Assembly will be the first of many steps towards democracy. This new People's Assembly needs to be generally inclusive of all Syrians, including Syria's women, as we just heard. Without the full, equal, and meaningful participation of Syrian women in the transitional process, it will not only lack legitimacy, but also lack the input of more than half of Syria's population. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. We also urge for the elections to the People's Assembly in Soweto and in the Kurdish areas to be organized as soon as possible. Second, Mr. President, the internal security situation remains highly volatile. We urge the transitional government to demonstrate to its people that it's able to control and rein in all armed forces under its command. This is crucial for the sense of trust and security of all Syrians, regardless of ethnicity, religion, or gender. In northeast Syria, we urge the transitional government and SDF to engage in further dialogue to move forward in implementing the agreement from March. The UN has offered assistance in mediation in this regard. Last month, this Council spoke with one voice condemning the attacks in Soweto. Denmark reiterates the condemnation forcefully today. We take note of yesterday's roadmap towards security in Soweto and trust that its transitional government continues to ensure credible, swift, transparent, and impartial investigations in line with international standards. We reiterate our deep concern over Israel's strikes on Syrian territory, including Damascus, which creates a more dangerous security landscape. We also reiterate our call for the full implementation of the 1974 agreement between Syria and Israel. Israel must withdraw from the area of separation, and UNDAF must be able to carry out its mandate. Third, Mr. President, progress must be made to improve the humanitarian situation affecting communities across Syria, which are facing increasing challenges regarding access to livelihoods and services. The fundamental reason for this is obvious: decades of economic mismanagement and 14 years of devastating conflict. Added to this is the severe economic crisis, along with housing, land, and property issues. As we heard from Ms. Chourbaji, harnessing the full potential of Syria's population, including its women, will be critical in reviving and developing its economy. Denmark will continue to play its part. We have long been and remain committed as a major donor to Syria. We urge all member states to join us to increase their financial assistance to humanitarian efforts rather than the funding cuts we heard USG Fletcher describe. Mr. President, in closing, the path ahead for Syria will not be simple nor without hardship, but it can be transformative. The international community, including this Council, must support it along the way. We owe this to the Syrian people, who suffered so much and fought so hard to get where we are today. Denmark looks forward to working with all Council members and with Syria to this end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Господин председатель, признательность спецпосланнику по Сирии Гейру Педерсену и заместителю генерального секретаря ООН по гуманитарным вопросам Тому Флетчеру за развернутые оценки положения дел в Сирийской Арабской Республике. Внимательно выслушали госпожу Chourbaji. Констатируем, что несмотря на усилия новых сирийских властей, социально-экономическая обстановка в Сирии по-прежнему остается крайне неустойчивой. Сказываются и последствия конфликта, и продолжающаяся нестабильность, и разрушена инфраструктура. Для преодоления проблем, с которыми сталкивается страна, ей необходимо помочь. Наша готовность содействовать сирийским властям в духе многолетней исторической дружбы, которая связывает два наших народа, была подтверждена в ходе недавнего визита сирийской межведомственной делегации во главе с министром иностранных дел Шейбани в Москву, а также поездки в Дамаск российской делегации во главе с вице-премьером Новиком. Практическим навстречу Дамаску со стороны международного сообщества стала бы не только отмена всех санкций, принятых в обход Совета Безопасности ООН, которые являются незаконными и должны быть в принципе исключены из международной практики, но и запуск механизмов экономического роста. А для этого нужны инвестиции, долгосрочные проекты и соответствующая поддержка со стороны всех государств, которые считают себя друзьями Сирии. При этом не следует забывать и о насущных гуманитарных потребностях. Мы высоко оцениваем усилия гуманитарных агентств ООН, благодаря которым в среднем 3,5 миллиона человек получают помощь каждый месяц. Согласны, что при наличии соответствующего финансирования ООН могла бы делать гораздо больше. Однако очевидно, что сирийский гуманитарный призыв, к сожалению, бьет антирекорды и профинансирован лишь на 15%, что ниже среднего показателя по другим гуманитарным операциям ООН. Считаем необходимым активизировать усилия по обеспечению устойчивого и предсказуемого финансирования. С тревогой фиксируем, что более 16,5 миллионов сирийцев продолжают остро нуждаться в помощи, что делает этот кризис одним из тяжелейших в мире. Особого внимания требует сфера продовольственной безопасности, поскольку именно она остается в зоне наибольшего риска в связи с крайне неблагоприятными погодными условиями, включая сильнейшую засуху последних лет. Такое положение дел существенно ограничивает возможности страны в сфере собственного сельскохозяйственного производства. В этих условиях особенно важно не только наращивать объем продовольственных поставок, но и обеспечивать внедрение устойчивых к погодным условиям сельскохозяйственных технологий. К тому же важно задействовать продвигаемые секретариатом ООН так называемые упреждающие подходы. При этом, к сожалению, несмотря на заявленную готовность сирийских властей к выстраиванию добрососедских отношений со всеми государствами региона, не все соседи Сирии готовы помочь ей встать на ноги. В частности, Израиль по полной воспользовался турбулентным периодом при смене власти в этой стране. С декабря 2024 года Западный Иерусалим оккупировал обширные районы на юге САР, регулярно наносит удары по сирийской территории, открыто вмешивается во внутренние дела республики. Осуждаем израильские действия, идущие вразрез с международным правом и нарушающие суверенитет, независимость и территориальную целостность Сирии. Требуем немедленного вывода подразделений Израиля с захваченных земель, а также возвращения к соблюдению соглашения о разъединении на Голландских высотах от 1974 года. Убеждены, что израильским интересам безопасности может служить только прагматическое сотрудничество с Дамаском. Попытки дестабилизировать страну и подыграть центробежным тенденциям грозят ввергнуть Сирию в пучину хаоса и будут лишь способствовать процветанию питательной для терроризма среды. Мы принципиально возражаем против того, чтобы сирийская территория использовалась в качестве арены для геополитического соперничества и сведения счетов между различными государствами. Господин председатель, на пути полноценного восстановления суверенитета и формирования государственных органов, представляющих всех сирийцев, этой стране предстоит преодолеть множество не только внешних, но и внутренних вызовов. Так, тревожной тенденцией последних месяцев для всех нас стала волна насилия с участием этнорелигиозных меньшинств, прокатившаяся по всей стране. Мартовская резня алавитов на западном побережье, июльские столкновения в Сувейде и обострение напряженности в отношениях Дамаска с курдским северо-востоком со всей ясностью демонстрируют хрупкость процесса восстановления единства сирийской государственности. Должный учет интересов всех этноконфессиональных групп сирийского общества – залог устойчивости и процветания Сирии. В этой связи обнадеживает заявленный руководством Дамаска настрой на обеспечение верховенства права и защиту всех граждан вне зависимости от их религиозной или национальной принадлежности. Привлечение всех виновных в расправах над мирными жителями в ходе трагических событий в Латаке и Тартусе, а также вооруженных столкновений в Сувейде, заложило бы фундамент в построение прочного мира в стране и вернуло бы доверие представителей всех элементов сирийского общества к властям. Выступаем также за полное и добросовестное выполнение соглашения между центральными властями и за Евфратием. Вызывает тревогу высокий уровень террористической угрозы в стране, явным примером чего стал июньский теракт в храме Антиохийской православной церкви пророка Божия Илии на востоке Дамаска. Сирийским властям следует предпринять все усилия для борьбы с террористической угрозой. Особое значение в этом контексте имеет проблематика иностранных террористов-боевиков, которым нет места в будущем Сирии. Рассчитываем, что Дамаск уделит самое серьезное внимание борьбе с этими тревожными явлениями. Признательны в этом контексте сирийскому руководству за предпринимаемые меры в целях обеспечения безопасности российских граждан и объектов на территории Сирии. Одной из наиболее острых задач, стоящих перед сирийским руководством в предстоящий период, остается укрепление государственных институтов и налаживание эффективной системы управления на всей территории страны. Поддерживаем дальнейшие шаги Дамаска по продвижению переходного периода в параметрах, предусмотренных резолюцией Совета Безопасности 2254, с участием всех сирийцев и при содействии ООН. Важно, чтобы этот процесс носил подлинный инклюзивный характер и отвечал интересам восстановления национального единства. Будем внимательно следить за ходом предстоящих в этом месяце парламентских выборов и искренне желать сирийцам преодолеть внутренние противоречия и приступить к устойчивому движению по пути прогресса и созидания. В этом сценарии заинтересованы все проверенные временем друзья Сирии, включая Россию. Благодарю вас.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Special Envoy Geir Pedersen and Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher for your briefings. And thank you as well to Ms. Majd Chourbaji for sharing your story and compelling perspective. And I would also like to welcome the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic with us today. The United States calls upon the Syrian government to seize the opportunity afforded by President Trump's sanctions relief. All Syrians deserve security, stability, and prosperity, and they rightly expect their leaders to deliver. We are under no illusions about the scale of the challenge. After 5 decades of vicious and predatory Assad rule, we know it will take time to rebuild and that there will be some setbacks. But for Syria's new leaders to succeed and maintain international support, they must ensure that every Syrian has a voice in how their country is governed, that every Syrian is protected regardless of their ethnicity or religion, and that there is zero tolerance for abuses, no matter the perpetrator or the victim. Only with that shared respect and common purpose can the country move forward. Syria's new leaders also need the support of foreign partners, and especially those within the region. In that respect, we applaud countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and Jordan that are stepping up to support Syrian institutions and restart the economy. President, the U.S. government has worked with the Syrian government and our Jordanian partners to design a roadmap to reconciliation after the horrific violence that occurred in Soweda, and we hope all parties involved will take that opportunity to build a future together as a nation of equal rights and shared obligations. We know many member states share our vision of a Syria free from terrorism and Iranian interference, committed to peaceful relations with its neighbors, free of chemical weapons, and with an open and transparent economy. We urge those member states to contribute to stabilization and reconstruction in Syria. The United States is doing its part by removing barriers previously imposed by our sanctions. For example, last month, the U.S. Department of Commerce announced it would ease licensing requirements for civilian exports to Syria. Already, these steps have accelerated critical work to rehabilitate Syria's telecommunications, sanitation, power generation, and civil aviation infrastructure. They represent our follow-through on President Trump's promise to allow a new start for the people of Syria as they seek a stable and prosperous future. In this vein, we also continue to pursue avenues to ease UN sanctions on Syria. We call for the Council and the international community to support these efforts. We will continue to help Syria rebuild ties with its neighbors as a key element of regional peace and security. Constructive dialogue between Syria and Israel will only add to stability and prosperity for the region. We will also continue working with Syria to prevent the resurgence of ISIS. A critical element of success in this effort is the commitment by all member states with nationals detained or displaced in northeast Syria to relocate them as soon as possible, either to their home country or a safe third country, and to work together to find solutions for remaining populations. President, we look forward to the events of High Level Week, including the ministerial hosted by the government of Iraq, focused on repatriation and rehabilitation of these third country nationals in northeast Syria. And we expect more commitments to this effort during High Level Week. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Nos unimos al agradecimiento al enviado especial Geir Pedersen, al secretario general adjunto Tom Fletcher y la señora Majd Chourbaji por sus sesiones informativas. La situación humanitaria en Siria sigue siendo grave. 16.5 millones de personas requieren de ayuda, de las cuales 7 millones son desplazados internos y 4.7 millones refugiados. La inseguridad, la presencia de restos explosivos de guerra y la sequía extrema agravan las necesidades, afectando la alimentación, la salud y la protección de la población. Por ello, Panamá reconoce los meritorios esfuerzos de OCHA, pese a las condiciones adversas, y reafirma la importancia del acceso seguro y sostenido de la ayuda humanitaria a todas las comunidades sin discriminación ni condicionamientos. De igual manera que acogemos con beneplácito el anuncio de la hoja de ruta para Sueida, iniciativa que refleja un compromiso sobre varios aspectos importantes por parte de las autoridades interinas sirias con el respaldo de Jordania y los Estados Unidos para promover la reconciliación. Al mismo tiempo, Panamá subraya que este esfuerzo representa una oportunidad para reforzar la unidad territorial y para que Sueida no solo sane sus heridas físicas, sino también avance en equidad y esperanza junto a todos los sirios. Panamá reitera su respaldo a la soberanía, independencia e integridad territorial de Siria y destaca el valor del acuerdo sobre la separación de las fuerzas de 1974 y de la Fuerza de las Naciones Unidas de Observación de la Superación UNDOF. Insistimos en la importancia de que todas las partes respeten plenamente dicho acuerdo y apoyen el mandato de UNDOF. También saludamos la próxima participación del presidente interino Ahmed al-Sharaa en la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas. Consideramos que este paso ofrece una oportunidad valiosa para reafirmar el compromiso de Siria con el multilateralismo, los principios de la Resolución 2254 y el seguimiento internacional a una solución política sostenible. Otro desafío persistente es la actividad del Daesh, cuya adaptabilidad y expansión territorial, incluso mediante el uso de tecnologías emergentes, representa una amenaza constante para la estabilidad nacional y regional. Panamá es consciente de que la reconstrucción de la institucionalidad, la gobernanza, la seguridad y los procesos electorales inclusivos requieren tiempo y apoyo internacional. Observamos con atención la intención de celebrar elecciones parlamentarias que habían sido convocadas parcialmente para esta semana, entendiendo, sin embargo, que deben celebrarse cuando las circunstancias sean adecuadas, ya que así podrán representar un paso importante en el proceso político del país. En todo caso, reiteramos la importancia de realizarlas cuando puedan organizarse de manera adecuada, con transparencia, inclusividad e integridad para garantizar su aceptación general. Los retrasos logísticos y la complejidad de organizar comicios en un contexto de posconflicto sin duda plantean desafíos que podrían afectar la confianza en los resultados y que refuerzan la importancia del acompañamiento por parte de las Naciones Unidas. Igualmente, consideramos que la participación política de las mujeres sigue siendo mínima. Por ello, instamos a todas las partes a implementar medidas concretas para que la voz de las mujeres sea escuchada, protegida y empoderada. Reiteramos que la inclusión efectiva de las mujeres es esencial para cualquier proceso de paz auténtico y sostenible. La estabilidad duradera en Siria solo será posible si las mujeres participan de manera equitativa y segura en la vida pública. Presidente, como reza el proverbio árabe, si el cimiento es débil, el techo se derrumba pronto. Este es el momento de apuntalar un proceso político de transición que convoque a todas las voces y que estructure sus ideas para alejarse de los errores del pasado. Solo así se puede edificar un mañana distinto, una Siria en la que cada institución sirva para proteger, cada voz sea escuchada y cada derecho humano sea respetado. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3+, namely Guyana, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and my own country, Algeria. At the outset, the A3+ extends their sincere appreciation to Special Envoy Geir Pedersen and Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher for their important briefings. President, the Syrian people look to tomorrow with both hope and apprehension, as expectations remain high while challenges are complex and difficult to overcome. As we have consistently highlighted, the A3+ stands ready to engage constructively to help the Syrian people to achieve their legitimate aspiration and build a brighter future for their country, a future free from the legacy of violence and instability. In this regard, we wish to underscore the following 5 points. First, silencing the guns and fostering dialogue among all Syrians is essential for the country's stability. We welcome the efforts of the Syrian government and its endeavors to extend security and stability throughout all of its territory, including the roadmap for resolving the crisis in Sueda and stabilizing southern Syria. The A3 Plus calls for a nationwide ceasefire and stresses that arms must be under the exclusive authority of the Syrian state. In this context, we call for the implementation of the March agreement with the SDF. Continued confrontation risks fueling instability and creating fertile ground for the resurgence of terrorism, particularly Daesh. Second, we reiterate the importance of an inclusive, Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. It is essential that Syrians themselves determine the fate of their country. Legislative elections represent an important milestone, but they must be organized carefully and inclusively and in a manner that ensure credibility and legitimacy. Third, the international community, and in particular the United Nations, has a crucial role to play in supporting Syria throughout its transition. The A3 Plus calls for constructive engagement between the UN and the Syrian authorities and reaffirms its strong support for the United Nations and the work of the Special Envoy. Fourth, external interference can only aggravate Syria's fragile situation. The A3 Plus calls on all regional and international actors to refrain from actions that could further destabilize the country. We strongly condemn Israel's military operations, which constitute a blatant violation of international law, including Article 2 of the United Nations Charters. We also call for the full implementation of the 1974 disengagement agreement and recall that the occupied Golan Heights is an integral part of Syria, as reaffirmed by Security Council Resolution 497. We demand an immediate end to Israeli incursion and the complete withdrawal from the occupied territory. Fifth, the humanitarian needs in Syria remain immense, while support is insufficient, despite the effort of OCHA. Rebuilding Syria requires the mobilization of the entire international community. Yes, the lifting of sanctions is a welcome step, but it is not enough. Without adequate assistance, refugees and displaced persons will be unable to return home, and Syria will not be able to reconnect with development and prosperity. The A3 Plus calls all donors to honor their pledges and urges the international community to extend meaningful and sustained support to Syria. President, at this critical juncture, the A3+ reaffirms its unwavering support for Syria, Syria's sovereignty, unity, independence, and territorial integrity. We remain fully convinced that only a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned process, supported by genuine international solidarity, can pave the way toward realizing the aspirations of Syrian people for peace, for development, and for dignity. The A3+ stands ready to continue working alongside the Syrian people and with all partners to achieve this goal. I thank you.
I thank the representative Algeria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Special Envoy Pedersen and Undersecretary General Fletcher for their briefings, as well as Ms. Majd Chourbaji, representing civil society, for her remarks. I also extend warm welcome to the newly appointed permanent representative of Syria, Ambassador Olabi. I wish you every success and I assure you of my country's full support. Mr. President, the ambassador's appointment offers us a glimpse of what a new Syria could look like. After long shadows, hope is rising. A vision of a Syria where the scars of war are not forgotten, but serve to shape a better future for all Syrians. Allow me to make 3 points. First, the pain endured by the Syrian people over the past 14 years under Assad's rule has been immense. We understand deep frustration with the inaction of the international community. Yet while injustice is impossible to forget, it is time to try to look beyond that. Multilateralism ensures collective security where every country has a voice. As firm believers in this principle, we strongly support a renewed partnership, a reset between the United Nations and Syria, and stand ready to help make it a reality. Second, we acknowledge steps taken by the transitional authorities, including the current formation of the People's Assembly as a legislative body. Transparency and genuine inclusion, along with pluralism, remain essential for any lasting political transition, in line with Resolution 2254. In this regard, the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women must be guaranteed. We strongly condemn recent atrocities and sectarian targeting of civilians in Suwaida, Latakia, and elsewhere. Equal protection from the state, accountability, and transitional justice, in line with international standards, must be central to national efforts. Long-term stability also requires comprehensive security sector reform and credible disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs. We encourage the interim authorities to continue cooperation with the United Nations and civil society, whose expertise will be crucial for a just and lasting peace. We welcome the roadmap between Syria, Jordan, and the United States aimed at resolving the crisis in Suwaida province. We again urge all actors to respect Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity, and to refrain from any actions that could escalate conflict or prolong human suffering. External military interventions risk destabilizing Syria and the wider region. This is in no one's interest. We join those who condemn the latest Israeli attacks on targets in Homs and Latakia. We reiterate our call to Israel to fully respect the 1974 disengagement agreement. Third, Violence must end and civilians must be protected. We are deeply concerned by reports of sectarian violence and the implications of continuing hostilities and extensive damage on the prospects of recovery, particularly its disproportionate impact of women and girls. Continued efforts will help counter hate speech and the spread of disinformation, reduce polarization, and promote reconciliation and mutual understanding among Syria's diverse communities. And finally, urgent humanitarian needs are still a reality for millions of people. This year's devastating drought may increase the number of food insecure people. Remaining hostilities are driving further displacement. Among the most vulnerable are women and girls, who face an increased risk of gender-based and sexual violence in conditions of displacement, depravity, and insecurity. It is imperative that aid reaches all in need swiftly, safely, and without obstruction. We support the tireless efforts of the United Nations, especially Special Envoy Pedersen, whose role remains essential in supporting an inclusive, Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. We stand ready to work with Syria, this Council, and the international community to support a peaceful, stable, and prosperous future, one the Syrian people waited for so long and so rightfully deserve. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. We thank Special Envoy Geir Pedersen and Under Secretary General Tom Fletcher for their detailed complimentary briefings. Their updates highlight the immense challenges that Syria faces today. We also thank Ms. Chourbaji for her statement, and we welcome the presence of the new permanent representative of Syria in the Council today, and also welcome the participation of Iran, Turkey, and Iraq in this meeting. Mr. President, Syria has endured more than a decade of devastating conflict and immense human suffering. Its people have borne the brunt of destruction, displacement, and hardship on an unimaginable scale. Mr. Pedersen rightly pointed to the massive legacy of conflict and civil strife, the imperative of economic and political stability driven by genuine inclusion and dialogue, and he also referred to external intervention by Israel, terming it unacceptable and that it must stop. And in this council, we know very well how this issue of foreign interference intertwined with occupation has been a perennial problem and a key destabilizing factor that manifests itself across the situations in the Middle East. Mr. President, despite these challenges, the recent developments have provided a glimmer of hope for Syria. This opportunity must be seized, and the Council has a special responsibility here. We believe that the path ahead must be marked by political progress, economic recovery, security stabilization, and respect for Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. In this regard, first, it is essential that the political transition in Syria proceed in a smooth, credible, and inclusive manner. We note with optimism the parliamentary elections scheduled for this month. These elections should serve as a stepping stone toward broader national reconciliation. It is imperative that all political and social groups in Syria are meaningfully represented and allowed a genuine stake in shaping their country's future. Second, the lifting of multiple sanctions on Syria is a welcome development. Syria possesses a vibrant and talented population and diaspora. Its people are spirited and eager to contribute to national recovery. With the easing of restrictions, the conditions are ripe for investments in construction, technology, and other productive sectors. Such investments can serve as powerful engines for reconstruction, job creation, and economic revitalization, which are indispensable for durable peace. It is imperative that these opportunities are fully realized. Third, and related to the above, is the fact that Syria's stability is inseparable from the question of security, which remains twofold. On the one hand, the security situation in areas such as Suweda, the western coast, and the northeast remains fragile and demands a healing touch and action-oriented approach. We welcome the efforts by Syria, Jordan, and the United States aimed at stabilizing Suweda and the south of Syria. On the other hand, the persistent threat posed by terrorist groups continues to endanger not only Syria but the wider region. The presence of foreign terrorist fighters underscores the urgency of this challenge. These concerns must be addressed comprehensively through both political and security measures, including the implementation of the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration reforms. Fourth, all forms of external aggression against Syria must cease, and the occupation of Syrian territory post 8 December 2024 must be reversed. The occupation of the Syrian Golan must also end in full compliance with international law and Security Council resolutions. The 1974 disengagement agreement should be strictly adhered to, and any new security arrangements must have the consent of the concerned parties and the endorsement of the Security Council. President, Syria's road to lasting peace and stability requires sustained international solidarity, unwavering respect for its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and tangible support to address its humanitarian and economic challenges. Pakistan stands in full solidarity with the brotherly people of Syria, and we will continue to support all efforts aimed at consolidating a sovereign, unified, inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous Syria. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie tout d'abord l'envoyé spécial du secrétaire général, Monsieur Geir Pedersen, dont l'action toutes ces années doit être saluée et que nous remercions pour ses propositions d'aujourd'hui. Saluer également le secrétaire général adjoint des Affaires humanitaires, Monsieur Tom Fletcher, qui nous rappelle l'urgence humanitaire, la nécessité d'y répondre, ainsi que vous, Madame Chourbaji, importante voix de la société civile syrienne nouvelle. Je souhaite la très bienvenue à Monsieur le nouveau représentant de la Syrie à New York et je salue les représentants de l'Irak, de l'Iran et de la Turquie. Monsieur le Président, la Syrie vit un moment historique et le défi pour ce Conseil est simple. Comment l'aider? Comment se mobiliser autour d'elle alors qu'elle se relève d'une longue et terrible période de guerre civile et d'une période plus longue encore de tyrannie? Pour la reconstruction d'une Syrie réconciliée au service de la paix dans la région, l'ensemble de la communauté internationale doit apporter tout le soutien nécessaire. Telle est notre responsabilité. Ce défi a trois dimensions principales. D'abord, face à la situation sécuritaire en Syrie, il est crucial de rassembler nos forces avec celles de la Syrie afin de restaurer la paix civile et de protéger tous les Syriens sans distinction. Les violences ces derniers mois ont illustré l'ampleur des menaces au rétablissement de l'unité dans le pays et entre toutes les composantes de la société syrienne. Il y faut la volonté politique des autorités de Damas, fermeté face aux fauteurs de troubles, ouverture et inclusivité politique. Il y faut un esprit de justice. Le rapport de la commission d'enquête indépendante des Nations Unies sur les violences sur la zone côtière doit être la base de mesures de réparation. Il y faut de la constance pour que la justice traditionnelle contribue progressivement à panser les plaies du passé. La France salue chaleureusement la feuille de route conclue par la Syrie, la Jordanie et les États-Unis pour résoudre la crise dans le gouvernorat de Ceuta. Cette feuille de route constitue une première étape vers une désescalade que nous souhaitons durable. Nous en soutenons la mise en œuvre rapide sur le terrain. Une Syrie unie et stable implique aussi l'éradication de la menace terroriste. Nous appelons les autorités syriennes à intensifier la lutte contre toute résurgence des mouvements terroristes et débarrasser la Syrie de ce fléau qui la défigure. Seconde dimension, humanitaire et économique. Pour répondre aux besoins immenses de la population syrienne, il nous appartient d'apporter une aide humanitaire massive et d'aider à la relance de l'économie. Après les décennies de malheur et de destruction, la Syrie est, nous l'avons entendu, en grande difficulté économique. La souffrance est aggravée par le pire épisode de sécheresse que le pays ait connu depuis près de 40 ans. Face à cette situation critique, il est de notre responsabilité collective de faciliter l'acheminement de l'aide humanitaire partout sur le territoire. Nous avons entendu le sous-secrétaire général à cet égard. Nous saluons également l'action essentielle d'OCHA et du personnel humanitaire à la suite des violences à Ceuta. Il nous faut travailler aussi avec le HCR et nos partenaires à un cadre régional permettant à la Syrie de voir ses talents et ses forces vives revenir vers elle pour bâtir la Syrie de demain. Le retour des réfugiés des pays voisins en particulier doit être assuré pour les réfugiés eux-mêmes, pour la reconstruction de la Syrie, pour la stabilité de ses voisins. Au-delà, la population syrienne dispose de tous les talents pour reconstruire et relancer l'économie dynamique, capable de faire de la Syrie un pôle de prospérité et d'innovation rayonnant dans la région. La France lui apporte tout son appui pour mobiliser les capitaux publics et privés nécessaires. Nous avons d'ailleurs, à titre européen, levé les sanctions pour faciliter cette reconstruction. S'agissant enfin de la dimension politique et diplomatique, la France, conformément à la déclaration de Paris sur la Syrie, est déterminée à apporter son soutien à une transition syrienne réussie et à une stabilité régionale durable. Cette transition, naturellement, elle appartient aux Syriens, dans un processus où chacun doit voir sa voix entendue. Les élections législatives prévues fin septembre, les premières depuis la chute du régime, peuvent marquer le début d'un processus politique transparent. La Syrie doit être respectueuse de toutes ses communautés et confessions, sunnites, chiites, kurdes, druzes, chrétiens, alaouites. Les femmes doivent être actrices à parité et à part entière de la reconstruction de la Syrie nouvelle. Cette diversité a toujours constitué l'atout maître du pays. La France a accueilli le 13 février une conférence internationale qui a tracé avec les Syriens les principes et les objectifs du soutien international à leur pays. La France s'investit en faveur de ce processus de transition pacifique qui construira une Syrie nouvelle. Au plan régional et international, et j'en terminerai par là, la Syrie doit être pleinement intégrée à son environnement régional, par la construction avec le Liban d'une relation nouvelle, fondée sur l'égalité et le respect mutuel, en rupture avec des décennies toxiques. Par la recherche de la paix avec Israël, Israël qui doit mettre fin aux bombardements et activités militaires dans le pays et se retirer de la zone du Golan, et qui doit saisir l'occasion historique que constitue une Syrie désireuse de pacifier ses relations avec ses voisins. Monsieur le Président, la présence du président Chara à New York la semaine prochaine doit être l'occasion pour le secrétaire général et l'ONU de définir avec lui la nouvelle présence de l'ONU au service de l'unité, de la souveraineté, de la paix, de la réconciliation, de la démocratie et de la reconstruction de la Syrie. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me thank Special Envoy Pedersen and Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher for their insightful briefings. I thank Mrs. Chourbaji, for highlighting the importance of women's participation in Syria's recovery. I also acknowledge the presence of the new Syrian ambassador, Mr. Ibrahim Olabi. Mr. Olabi, we welcome you to the Council as you strive for a new Syria at the UN. Mr. President, I want to highlight 3 points today. First, The vision of a new Syria will only be realized once a truly inclusive political transition has been achieved. Syria is a country of a tremendous wealth, a wealth that lies in its ethnic, religious, and cultural diversity. After years of suffering, all Syrians deserve a country in which they feel protected, safe, and included. In this context, we took careful note of the announcement of the selection of 2/3 of the country's legislative council by regional electoral committees. New legislative structures need to ensure democratic legitimacy and a fair representation for all. We regret the security conditions that led to the suspension of the electoral process in the Druze-dominated Shweida and the Kurdish-controlled governorates. We expect the political transition to include all Syrians, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Kurds, and importantly, women. It is clear that only if all religious and ethnic groups feel safe and politically represented can Syria move forward in its path for reconciliation, social cohesion, and economic development. It is encouraging in this regard that Syria's transitional president met with the Patriarch of Antioch last month, the leader of a community which has suffered a lot, especially in the Mar Elias Church terrorist attack this summer. Which brings me to my second point. Syria's volatile security landscape must be properly addressed, especially as the terrorist threat persists. Perpetrators of violence, regardless of affiliation, must be brought to justice in line with international norms. We welcome the roadmap agreed by Syria, Jordan, and the US on restoring stability in Shweida, expecting full accountability. Similarly, the report of the UN Commission of Inquiry on violations committed against civilians in coastal and western central Syria earlier this year must be followed up. We urge the interim authorities to do so. Equally, we hope that genuine progress on the implementation of the March agreement between Damascus and the SDF will be made possible. This, in the context of wider efforts to assure safety and inclusivity for all Syrians. All regional actors must respect international law, refraining from incitement, threat, or the use of force, as well as malign influence or interference. Third, Syria needs to rebound as its economy is currently in disarray and humanitarian needs remain urgent. Aware of the challenges on the ground, the EU was swift in lifting sanctions in line with a gradual and reversible approach. It also introduced new listings under the EU Global Human Rights Sanctions regime, targeting those responsible for serious human rights abuses. Syria needs to be rebuilt for the refugees and to return home, involving the diverse and wealthy Syrian diaspora to this end is necessary. In this sense, we reaffirm Syria's unity, independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, urging all to respect it fully. Mr. President, with the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly now upon us, Syria stands at crossroads. We look forward to the address of Syria's transitional president next week, certainly a significant milestone in the country's history. We will remain hopeful, but also vigilant, especially about a new Syria, which is inclusive for all and free from foreign interference. Greece stands at the side of the Syrian people and the United Nations along this path. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席，我感谢裴凯如特使和 Fletcher 副秘书长的通报。 认真听取了民间社会代表乔尔巴吉女士的发言，欢迎叙利亚、伊朗、伊拉克、土耳其的代表出席今天的会议。中国和叙利亚是友好国家，中方始终致力于发展面向全体叙利亚人民的友好关系，从不干涉叙利亚内政，尊重叙利亚人民的选择。当前形势下，国际社会要向叙利亚提供建设性帮助，推动叙利亚早日恢复和平稳定。叙利亚临时当局应该采取切实措施，积极回应国际社会的关切。我讲3点。第一，坚定推进包容性政治过渡。中方支持叙利亚临时当局根据安理会第2254号决议确定的原则，继续同叙利亚各方开展对话协商，争取早日实现内部和解，打造广泛包容的治理架构。叙利亚不能发生新的大规模的暴力事件。叙利亚各群体的声音应当得到认真的倾听，权利应当得到充分的尊重，安全应当得到同等的保护。叙利亚将举行临时人民议会选举，联合国可为此提供协助。第二，坚决打击一切形式的恐怖主义。外国恐怖作战分子在叙利亚活动猖獗，叙利亚境内的反恐形势依然严峻。恐怖分子一日不除，叙利亚就一日难回正常发展道路。叙利亚应切实履行反恐义务，采取一切必要措施，打击包括东伊运在内的所有被安理会列明的恐怖组织，以实际行动取信于国际社会。在反恐问题上，必须坚持零容忍，绝不能搞包庇、纵容，甚至政治利用。第三，尽快帮助缓解人道困境。国际社会，特别是传统捐助方，应当加大人道投入，为叙利亚人道行动提供充足的资金支持。叙利亚各方要履行国际人道法义务，确保不受阻碍的人道准入，保障人道工作人员的安全，为联合国人道行动提供便利。相信在国际社会的帮助下，叙利亚人民终将渡过难关。主席，国际社会在处理叙利亚问题时，应当始终遵守一条基本原则，那就是叙利亚的主权、安全和领土完整必须得到各方的充分尊重。我们呼吁以色列停止对叙利亚的军事行动，立即从叙利亚领土撤出。作为中东国家的战略伙伴，中方愿同国际社会一道，继续为推动叙利亚实现长治久安、中东地区恢复和平安宁发挥建设性作用。谢谢主席。
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And thank you, Special Envoy Pedersen and USG Fletcher for briefing us today. Thank you too, Ms. Chourbaji, for your powerful testimony, which outlined the horrific toll the former regime had on your family and on the families of so many Syrians. The UK stands with you as you build a better future. I'd also like to take the opportunity to welcome to the Council the new Syrian permanent representative, and the UK looks forward to working with you in support of Syria's political transition and economic reconstruction. President, I'll make 3 points. First, the Syrian government has made progress in seeking to foster genuine national reconciliation and in laying the foundations for state institutions that work for and represent all of Syria. This includes recent steps towards holding indirect elections for the People's Assembly and the efforts of the Supreme Electoral Committee to consult across Syria and guarantee at least 20% of electors are female. We encourage the government to continue to prioritise women's meaningful participation in the political transition and to use this opportunity to take further steps to ensure a representative and inclusive political process. We also encourage further concrete progress in the negotiations between the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Syrian government to build towards a unified and more secure Syria. Second, we reiterate our call on Israel to refrain from actions that risk destabilizing Syria and to respect Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The UK welcomes the ongoing engagement between Syria and Israel. Dialogue and diplomacy, not military action, will help achieve a more peaceful future for both countries and for the region. Third, we acknowledge the progress made on aid access in Suwaida, which USG Fletcher described for us, but call on parties to focus on a solution for peace. 180,000 people remain displaced in southern Syria, with significant humanitarian needs. We urge prioritizing restoration of critical infrastructure, such as water and electricity, as soon as possible. Likewise, as the new school year starts, we urge the government to assist those displaced to return home so that children can continue their schooling at this critical moment. We welcome the efforts of Syria, Jordan, and the United States in developing a roadmap to address the crisis in Suwaida and stabilize southern Syria. President, next week we will see the historic visit of President al-Assad to the United Nations, where we look forward to hearing more details on his vision for a secure and prosperous Syria that delivers for the rights and needs of all Syrians. We reiterate the importance of this Council taking the necessary measures to bolster Syria's economy, including reforming UN sanctions. The UN can also play a crucial role in supporting Syria's transition, and in this regard, we look forward to hearing from the Secretary-General on his recommendations for the UN's future role and footprint in Syria. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. Excuse me. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the Republic of Korea. I thank Special Envoy Pedersen and USG Fletcher for their informative briefings, and I also take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciations to Ms. Chourbaji for sharing compelling stories. We hope Ms. Chourbaji's intervention today serves as a fresh reminder that ensuring inclusivity in economic recovery is also an imperative goal that should not be obscured because of security developments. Let me briefly touch upon the following 3 points. First, noting that this week's election were postponed, we call on Syria to exercise utmost caution in holding any further election that may lead to a divided Syria. Since the fall of the Assad regime, Council members have repeatedly called for a parliamentary election as a means to form a full government with a democratic legitimacy. As a member state with a history of holding its first elections under the auspices of the UN, we can also resonate with the Damascus aspirations to hold a national elections as soon as possible. Yet, the Korean Peninsula's painful history tells that having an election just in part of that country carries a significant risk of fragmentation. In addition to possible tragic military confrontation between nationals. An inclusive transition should be understood not as a formality, but as a nuanced and comprehensive process. In this regard, we call on Damascus to focus on creating a conducive environment for nationwide elections, including the finalization of SDF integration talks and announcing a clear plan to conduct future elections. Second, all foreign intervention and occupation should be halted immediately. While the security talks between Syria and Israel have given the international community a glimmer of hope amidst the ever-worsening regional security landscape, IDF airstrike and ground incursions in recent days gives little optimism for a better tomorrow. Respecting other countries' territorial integrity is the basic tenet of international relations, and all hostilities violating Syria's territorial sovereignty must stop. Lastly, we urge Syria to prioritize combating terrorism and preventing a resurgence of extremist ideologies. Recent weeks witnessed the deeply concerning re-emergence of both Daesh and the anti-government insurgency, adding yet another layer of security concern in the fragile situation. These very same security concerns are also cited as the main barriers to return by more than 75% of refugees abroad, further undermining prospects for durable resettlement and national reconciliation. We therefore urge Damascus to prioritize, at all costs, demobilizing and repatriating foreign terrorist fighters. Likewise, implementing robust vetting and rehabilitation measures should be realized to prevent extremists from taking charge of national security. And those responsible for sectarian violence must be held fully accountable. I now resume my function as Security Council President. I now give the floor to the representative of Syrian Arab Republic.
السيد الرئيس، أهنئكم وفريقكم على حسن إدارة أعمال المجلس للشهر الجاري، وأتقدم بالشكر للسيد جير بيدرسون المبعوث الخاص إلى سوريا، والسيد توم فليتشر وكيل الأمين العام للشؤون الإنسانية ومنسق الإغاثة في حالات الطوارئ على الإحاطة، كما أتقدم بالتحية والتقدير للسيدة ماجد شوربجي من المجتمع المدني على إحاطتها القيمة وعلى صمودها بعد تجربتها المؤلمة مع النظام البائد، وهو تذكير لنا جميعاً بما تحررنا منه. واسمحوا لي أن أؤكد لها أن صوت المجتمع المدني السوري سيكون محل ترحيب الوفد، فهذه هي سوريا الجديدة. أرحب أيضاً بخطاباتكم، والتي يبدو لي أنها وحدت المجلس حول الفرصة التاريخية لسوريا والمنطقة والأمم المتحدة، والتي تحدثتم فيها جميعاً عن الأمل، وأنا أضيف هنا من منطلق المسؤولية كحكومة الأمل والعمل. السيد الرئيس، قبل أقل من عام وقبل سقوط النظام تحدثت أمام مجلسكم الموقر شابة سورية من ذلك المقعد بينما كنت أجلس أنا وزملائي هناك في الأعلى. رفعت صوتها عالياً ضد الظلم والاستبداد، مرددة بشجاعة وثبات صرخات الحرية، وعرضت أمامكم صورة لساحة من ساحات الثورة في البلاد. كانت تلك الساحة هي ساحة الكرامة في السويداء، الساحة التي ما فتئت يوماً تصدح بالحرية ضد الظلم والطغيان. واليوم ورغم الجراح الأليمة والحوادث المؤسفة التي أدمت قلوب السوريين والسوريات، فإن السويداء وأهلها الكرام كانوا وسيبقون في قلب كل سوري، حالها حال جميع المحافظات السورية وكل بقعة من هذه البلاد التي ارتوت بدماء السوريين والسوريات الذين ثاروا من أجل الحرية والكرامة. لقد آلمت الأحداث المؤلمة التي حدثت في السويداء الحكومة السورية كما آلمت جميع السوريين، وأتقدم في هذا المجال بأحر التعازي لكل عائلة سورية فقدت أحد أحبائها في هذا المصاب الجلل. ولذلك فقد بذلت الحكومة السورية قصارى جهدها لمعالجة الجراح الناجمة عن تلك الأحداث، وانطلاقاً من حرص الحكومة السورية على وحدة البلاد، فقد انخرطت بحسن نية ونهج بناء في جميع المبادرات الرامية لحل هذه الأزمة، والتي توجت باعتماد خارطة الطريق لحل أزمة السويداء واستقرار جنوب سوريا، والتي تم إقرارها خلال الاجتماع الثلاثي الذي عقد في دمشق وجمع الجمهورية العربية السورية والمملكة الأردنية الهاشمية والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. وكنت قد وجهت يوم أمس مع زميلي السفيرة الأمريكية والمندوب الدائم للمملكة الأردنية رسالة إلى مجلس الأمن لاعتماد خارطة الطريق كوثيقة رسمية في الأمم المتحدة ومجلس الأمن. سيد الرئيس، إن أول بنود خارطة الطريق كانت دعوة لجنة التحقيق الدولية المستقلة بشأن الجمهورية العربية السورية لإجراء تحقيق في الأحداث الأخيرة، والتزام الحكومة السورية بمحاسبة جميع مرتكبي الانتهاكات. وتعلمون جميعاً أننا في سوريا الجديدة كنا قد عملنا على تمديد ولاية اللجنة وتعاوننا معها في سابقة تاريخية. وبدورها كانت الحكومة السورية قد شرعت مسبقاً باعتقال عدد من المتهمين بارتكاب الانتهاكات من أفراد وزارة الدفاع والداخلية، وهذا ما شهدت به العديد من وسائل الإعلام الدولية الموثوقة. ولكننا نشدد في هذا السياق على أن المساءلة يجب أن تشمل جميع مرتكبي الانتهاكات بلا استثناء ودون تمييز، ولا بد لذوي الضحايا من أن يشعروا بأن يد العدالة قد أنصفتهم. إن خارطة الطريق هذه تؤسس لبناء الثقة تدريجياً وتعزيز المصالحة الوطنية وضمان إيصال المساعدات الإنسانية وإعادة الخدمات الأساسية وإعادة إعمار القرى المتضررة والممتلكات المتضررة وإنشاء قوة شرطة محلية تضم جميع مكونات المجتمع في المحافظة، وإرساء خطاب وطني جامع يحتفي بالتعددية وينبذ خطاب الكراهية والتطرف، ويكرس المساواة أمام القانون، وغيرها من البنود التي تمثل خطوة مهمة نحو استعادة الاستقرار في الجنوب وترسيخ وحدة سوريا أرضاً وشعباً. السيد الرئيس، تمضي سورية اليوم قدماً في مسيرة التعافي وإعادة البناء، وها هي تتجاوز مرحلة تلو الأخرى. فبعد تحرير البلاد من الاستبداد والحفاظ على مؤسسات الدولة وملء الفراغ الرئاسي، تم البدء بحوار وطني ثم تشكيل حكومة متنوعة مبنية على الكفاءات. واليوم تستكمل الجهود لإجراء عملية انتخابية تناسب خصوصية المرحلة الانتقالية وتحديات ما بعد النزاع، وذلك بهدف ملء الفراغ التشريعي في استحقاق سيد الرئيس هو الأول من نوعه منذ عقود طويلة، يقوم على العمل نحو فصل السلطات. ونرحب في هذا السياق بالاتفاقات بين اللجنة العليا للانتخابات وعدد من منظمات المجتمع المدني، حيث وضعت الحكومة نصب أعينها أن تكون هذه الانتخابات فرصة حقيقية ليشارك السوريون والسوريات في صياغة مستقبل البلاد. لقد شددت المراسيم الناظمة للعملية الانتخابية على تمثيل جميع المكونات السورية وضمان مشاركة الفئات الأكثر هشاشة وتمثيل المرأة بنسبة لا تقل عن 20% في قائمة الهيئة الناخبة، وفتحت الباب واسعاً أمام الرقابة القضائية والرقابة الإعلامية وصولاً منها إلى دعوة المنظمات الدولية والبعثات الدبلوماسية للاطلاع على العملية الانتخابية. إن سوريا تؤمن بأن هذه الانتخابات رغم كل الصعوبات ورغم كل التحديات ستكون خطوة أولى على طريق ترسيخ السلم الأهلي وبناء المؤسسات التي تمثل السوريين والسوريات بحق وتجسد تطلعاتهم. ولا تكتفي الحكومة السورية بالخطوات السياسية فحسب، بل تحث الخطى وتبذل جهوداً كبيرة للارتقاء بالواقع الاقتصادي، إذ تم توقيع عشرات الاتفاقات مع الدول الشقيقة والصديقة ومذكرات التفاهم مع مختلف الشركات الدولية والعالمية. وكذلك يتكاتف السوريون حول العالم ويستنهضون طاقتهم في حملات مجتمعية سخية لدعم جهود التعافي بعد سنوات طويلة من الظلم والمعاناة. الزميلات والزملاء، إن سوريا تدين وبأشد العبارات الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية وتجدد مطالبتها مجلس الأمن بالتحرك الفوري لإدانة هذه الاعتداءات ومنع تكرارها، وإلزام سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بسحب قواتها من الأراضي السورية التي توغلت فيها على مدى الأشهر الماضية، وإنهاء احتلالها للجولان السوري وفق قرارات الأمم المتحدة ذات الصلة، وفي مقدمتها القرارات 242 و383 و497. السيد الرئيس، لا تزال الجهود المنتظرة من المجتمع الدولي لتحقيق نقلة نوعية على المستويين الإنساني والتنموي دون المستوى المأمول، إذ لا زال الكثير من السوريين، وكما تشير الأرقام التي سمعناها قبل قليل، يعانون جراء الافتقار الشديد للخدمات الأساسية والتحديات الناجمة عن الآثار الخطيرة والكارثية لتغير المناخ وموجة الجفاف الأسوأ منذ 3 عقود، والتي تحرم السوريين من احتياجاتهم الأساسية من المياه وتهدد بشكل جدي الإنتاج الزراعي والأمن الغذائي، ناهيك عن التلوث الكبير بمخلفات الحرب القابلة للانفجار وللألغام التي تشكل عائقاً كبيراً أمام عودة اللاجئين والمهجرين واستصلاح الأراضي الزراعية. ورغم النجاحات التي تحدثت عنها وتحدثتم أنتم عنها، فإن تجاوز التحديات أعلاه يتطلب حشد الجهود الدولية وتعزيز الانخراط الإيجابي الدولي الداعم لسوريا وللسوريين، ودعم البرامج الرامية لإنعاش القطاعات الحيوية، وتكثيف البرامج الإنسانية التنموية، والوفاء بالتعهدات المعلنة لتمويل خطة الاستجابة الإنسانية. ولا يفوتني في هذا السياق توجيه الشكر للدول الأعضاء في مجلس الأمن على التسهيلات التي قدموها لمشاركة الوفد السوري في لحظة تاريخية في أعمال الأسبوع الرفيع المستوى للدورة 80 للجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة. تجدد الحكومة السورية في هذا الصدد التزامها الراسخ بالشراكة والتعاون مع الأمم المتحدة وجميع وكالاتها المتخصصة، وتدعو الأمم المتحدة لتعزيز جهودها لتكون خير داعم للسوريين في هذه المرحلة المفصلية من تاريخهم. ختاماً السيد الرئيس، إن دمشق التي لطالما كانت قلب سوريا ورمز وحدتها ستبقى البيت الجامع لكل السوريين والسوريات، تفتح ذراعيها لهم مهما اختلفت مشاربهم وتنوعت معتقداتهم، فتنوعهم سيدي الرئيس مصدر قوة وثراء يثبت أن سوريا كانت وستبقى عصية على كل محاولات الفرقة والانقسام. إن السوريين بتاريخهم المشترك وإرثهم العريق يقفون اليوم صفاً قوياً يتطلعون فيه نحو المستقبل المنشود، رافضين الإرهاب وخطابات الكراهية والتطرف، مصرين على طي صفحة الآلام والمعاناة، عازمين على بناء وطن يتسع لجميع أبنائه دون استثناء، بعيداً عن أي تهميش أو إقصاء. وطن موحد غني بتنوعه، ثابت في سيادته، حر في قراره، وماض بإرادة شعبه نحو مستقبل مشرق يصنعه السوريون معاً، رجالاً ونساء، شباباً وشابات. شكراً السيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Syrian Arab Republic for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, thank you, Mr. President. We thank Special Envoy Mr. Pedersen and Undersecretary Mr. Fletcher for the informative and insightful briefing. We have taken note of the statement delivered by Ms. Majd Chourbaji. On the situation in Syria, I wish to make the following points. First, on the humanitarian situation. The humanitarian situation in Syria is dire and continues to deteriorate. Critical funding shortfalls threaten life-saving aid operations, leaving millions of Syrians vulnerable. We commend OCHA, UN agencies and humanitarian partners for their tireless effort to deliver assistance under extremely difficult circumstances. Full, safe, rapid and unhindered humanitarian access to all affected communities in strict accordance with the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality and independence is essential. Beyond the urgent need for humanitarian relief, Syria continues to confront profound economic challenges and an escalating food crisis, inflation, devastated infrastructure, broken supply chain, energy shortage, and recurring drought threaten the very survival of millions. These hardships are the direct result of years of unilateral coercive measures imposed in Syria, measures that are illegal, illegitimate, and in blatant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. These illegal measures gravely hinder recovery, obstruct reconstruction, and exacerbate the suffering of the Syrian people. They must be lifted in their entirety without condition to allow Syria to rebuild its economy, restore livelihood, and enable the safe and dignified return of refugees and internally displaced persons. Sanctions must never be used as an instrument of political coercion or interference in Syrian internal affairs. Second, on the security situation. The ceasefire arrangement remains fragile, while insecurity persists in Syria and other regions. Terrorist groups such as Daesh, al-Qaeda, and affiliated foreign terrorist fighters continue to destabilize Syria and the wider region, seriously undermining regional and international peace and security. The Security Council must also not ignore the ongoing destabilizing and aggressive action of the Israeli regime in Syria. Iran emphasized that all foreign occupation must end. Israel's act of aggression, including repeated airstrikes against Syrian territory, constitute flagrant violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. The Council must not remain silent on these violations. Third, on the political process. Lasting peace and stability in Syria can only be achieved through a comprehensive Syrian-owned and Syrian-led political process, free from foreign interference and coercion. This process must be genuinely inclusive of all communities. Excluding key groups would only deepen graveness, undermine legitimacy, and risk destabilizing an already fragile situation. Such a process must safeguard the legitimate rights and aspirations of all Syrians, while preserving Syrian sovereignty, independence, unity, and national institutions. In this context, we support the recent diplomatic engagement of the Special Envoy with Syrian authorities in Damascus regarding the inclusive political transition. Fourth, on the Iran principal position, we reiterate that the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria must be fully respected. Any attempts to impose external agendas or fragment the country is unacceptable. We are concerned by agendas or demands for federalization or autonomy. Mishandled, these aspirations could fuel fragmentation and renewed conflict. Address responsibility through an inclusive national dialogue under the auspices of the United Nations. They could instead contribute to reconciliation and stability. Iran will continue to support the Syrian people and their efforts to restore peace, stability, reconstruction, and national reconciliation, fully in the line with the will of the Syrian people themselves. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Iraq.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. يشرفني أن ندلي بهذا البيان باسم المجموعة العربية. أتوجه بجزيل الشكر للسيد جير بيدرسون المبعوث الخاص للأمين العام إلى سوريا، والسيد توم فليتشر وكيل الأمين العام للشؤون الإنسانية ومنسق الإغاثة في حالات الطوارئ على إحاطتيهما القيمتين. كما استمعنا إلى المداخلة المهمة للسيدة مجد شوربجي، وأرحب بسعادة المندوب الدائم الجديد للجمهورية العربية السورية السفير إبراهيم علبي في نيويورك، وأكد استعداد دول المجموعة العربية لاستمرار التعامل مع الوفد الدائم لسوريا بما يدعم جهود الحكومة السورية وتطلعات الشعب السوري في هذه المرحلة الحرجة. السيد الرئيس، تؤكد المجموعة العربية على دعمها الراسخ وترحيبها بجهود الحكومة السورية ومساعيها لبسط الأمن والاستقرار على كامل أراضيها، بما في ذلك خارطة الطريق لحل الأزمة في السويداء واستقرار جنوب سوريا التي اعتمدها الاجتماع الثلاثي الذي جمع الجمهورية العربية السورية والمملكة الأردنية الهاشمية والولايات المتحدة في العاصمة السورية دمشق. كما تشدد المجموعة العربية على أهمية استمرار العملية السياسية الشاملة بقيادة وملكية سورية القائمة على الحوار السوري بعيداً عن التدخلات الخارجية، وبما يحقق تطلعات الشعب السوري بكافة مكوناته، ويعزز المصالحة الوطنية والسلم الأهلي، ويصون وحدة سوريا وسيادتها وسلامة أراضيها. تدين المجموعة العربية بأشد العبارات اعتداءات الكيان الإسرائيلي المتكررة على الأراضي السورية، وترفض رفضاً قاطعاً أي ذرائع لتبرير تلك السياسات العدوانية ضد سوريا، وتحذر من المحاولات الإسرائيلية المشبوهة الرامية إلى استغلال الأوضاع الداخلية لإثارة الفتنة والطائفية، وتطالب مجلس الأمن بالاطلاع بمسؤولياته وإلزام سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بوقف انتهاكاتها والانسحاب الكامل من جميع الأراضي السورية المحتلة، وفي مقدمتها الجولان العربي السوري المحتل، تنفيذاً لقرارات مجلس الأمن ذات الصلة، ولا سيما القرارات 242 338 و497 والالتزام باتفاق فض الاشتباك لعام 1974. كما تشدد المجموعة العربية على أهمية تعزيز العمل الإنساني في سوريا، وتدعو المجتمع الدولي إلى زيادة تمويل خطة الاستجابة الإنسانية التي ما زالت تعاني من فجوات كبيرة، بما يساهم في تلبية الاحتياجات الأساسية وتهيئة الظروف الملائمة لعودة اللاجئين والنازحين عودة طوعية وآمنة وكريمة. كما تعرب عن تقديرها العميق للدول المستضيفة للاجئين السوريين، وتدعو لزيادة وتوسيع الدعم الدولي للدول المضيفة التي لا يمكن أن تتحمل ذلك العبء بمفردها. في هذا السياق ترحب المجموعة العربية بقرارات رفع العقوبات الاقتصادية المفروضة على سوريا، وتؤكد أن إنهاء هذا الملف بشكل نهائي يشكل أمراً ضرورياً لتخفيف معاناة الشعب السوري ولتمكين الحكومة السورية من الانخراط الفاعل في جهود التعافي المبكر وإعادة الإعمار والتنمية المستدامة وتحقيق الأمن والاستقرار. السيد الرئيس، يمثل دعم سوريا في هذه المرحلة المصيرية التزاماً أخلاقياً وسياسياً من المجتمع الدولي، وتؤكد المجموعة العربية هنا على ضرورة حشد الجهود لتعزيز الدعم الدولي لسوريا بمختلف أشكاله، بما في ذلك تعزيز الاستثمارات ودفع التعاون الاقتصادي قدماً، بما يساهم في دعم جهود تحقيق الأمن والاستقرار ويدفع مسيرة التنمية وإعادة البناء إلى الأمام، ويضمن بناء مستقبل آمن ومزدهر يليق بتطلعات الشعب السوري الشقيق. تؤكد المجموعة العربية مجدداً على أن أمن سوريا واستقرارها جزء لا يتجزأ من الأمن العربي والإقليمي، وأن الحفاظ على وحدة سوريا ومؤسساتها الوطنية هو الضمانة الحقيقية لمنع زعزعة الاستقرار الإقليمي ولمكافحة الإرهاب بجميع أشكاله ومظاهره، ومنع عودة الجماعات الإرهابية. وتعرب المجموعة عن الدعم الكامل لجهود سوريا في مجال مكافحة الإرهاب وتأمين الحدود ومكافحة تهريب الأسلحة والمخدرات، وتؤكد أهمية دعم هذه الجهود وتعزيز التعاون في إطار دعم الأمن الإقليمي ومكافحة التهديدات العابرة للحدود. وتدعو المجموعة العربية الحكومة السورية إلى مواصلة التعاون مع المجتمع الدولي بهدف التصدي للمخاطر الإرهابية والقضاء على الإرهاب بكافة أشكاله وصوره واجتثاث منابعه. وفي الختام، تجدد المجموعة العربية تأكيد تضامنها الكامل مع الجمهورية العربية السورية ودعوتها المجتمع الدولي لتعزيز التعاون وحشد الجهود واستثمار الفرصة السانحة لدعم الشعب السوري في مسيرته نحو السلام والاستقرار والتنمية. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I thank the representative of Iraq for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to Special Envoy Pedersen, USG Fletcher, and Ms. Chourbaji, Ehlan. Syrian government has made remarkable progress since last December, despite the scale of challenges. Rehabilitation projects in infrastructure are already underway, and access to electricity in the country has improved. Reconstruction process will only accelerate once all natural resources come under the control of the Syrian government for the benefit of the whole Syrian people. We are encouraged to observe that Syria's engagement with the international community is advancing on a steady and constructive path. Participation of the Syrian president in the UN General Assembly during High-Level Week will be of enormous importance in reinforcing this engagement. Turkey will continue to support lifting of all sanctions as the Syrian government pursues its reconstruction agenda. Mr. President, the new period in Syria requires sustained efforts to ensure peace and stability on the basis of its territorial integrity and unity. A Syria that has re-established its sovereignty, territorial integrity and stability is also key to preventing wider security risks. Empowering the Syrian government is essential to achieving this goal. From the outset, Turkey has facilitated mobilization of regional and international efforts to engage with the new government. It is important not to lose sight of the need to secure stability and security. Syrian government is committed to improving the safety and security of the country of all its people, and this should be supported. In this regard, we welcome the roadmap announced by Syria, Jordan, and the United States with the objective of preserving calm, ensuring stability, and preventing renewed conflict in Sueda province. Turkey will support initiatives that promote peace, security, and stability for all components in the Syrian society. But it is also essential for Israel to reconsider its policy of aggression, of keeping Syria weak and fragmented, and to recognize that Syria's stability also serves for the security of all in the region. Mr. President, recent developments have also underscored the importance of a comprehensive and transparent political transition process supported by all segments of society. We hope that the upcoming People's Assembly elections will contribute to this end. It is equally important that Syrian government assume control in the northeast, including camps and detention centers. These would create the conditions for enhanced regional cooperation toward the definitive defeat of Daesh terror organization. International community should rely on the Syrian government to lead a credible, effective and accelerated repatriation process from the camps. Establishment of a centralized administration, a national army, is indispensable for the unity and stability. National security must be ensured through a unified military under a single central authority-led chain of command. It is also noteworthy that the Syrian government's capacity to counter Daesh has been significantly reinforced over the past 9 months. The 10th March agreement between the Syrian government and the so-called SDF remains entirely unimplemented. SDF continues to play for time and has shown no interest in a united future for Syria. Hopefully, it will change. More pressure must be placed on the SDF to this end. Ideas and initiatives that carry the risk of fragmentation are not acceptable. Mr. President, keeping Syria on the track is our shared responsibility. The period ahead requires constructive engagement with the Syrian government and closer international cooperation. Turkey will remain fully committed to this vision. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Turkey for the statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Geir Pedersen to respond to comments.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's not really to respond to comments, but I have an announcement or whatever you like to call it. So I wish to let the Council know that I have informed the Secretary General of my intention to step down after more than 6.5 years serving as the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria. And he has graciously accepted my request. Firstly, let me say, and let me really underscore this, I am, and I believe we all are, deeply indebted to and profoundly grateful to the Syrian people who have shown extraordinary courage and humanity throughout these years. And today we heard 2 very impressive voices from Majd Chourbaji and the new PR. And I'm going to miss listening to that. But as my family and colleagues know, it has been my intention for quite some time to move on for personal reasons after a long period of service. Yet, given the extraordinary changes in Syria and the opening of a new chapter, it has also been both my duty and indeed my privilege to remain in office and to help guide the United Nations political efforts in the first crucial months of this historical period of political transition. I will be departing in the near future, but I assure that I will remain fully engaged in my responsibilities until my final day in office. I again extend my deepest gratitude to the Secretary General for his trust and unwavering support, and indeed to my exceptional team for their tireless dedication, and to the Security Council for its sustained backing throughout this journey. It's been a pleasure. My experience in Syria has affirmed an enduring truth that sometimes it's darkest before the dawn. For so long, progress seemed absolutely impossible, until suddenly it came. Few have endured suffering as profound as the Syrians, and few have demonstrated such resilience and determination. Today, Syria and the Syrian people have a new dawn, and we must ensure that this becomes a bright day. They deserve this so much. Thank you once again.
I thank Special Envoy Pedersen for his further statement. Representative of Algeria, has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Thank you, President. I'm taking the floor first to say sorry. Sorry to Ms. Majd Chourbaji. I omitted this morning in my statement to welcome you on behalf of the A3+. I can assure you that we, the A3+, have listened carefully to your very interesting presentation. Second, again, on behalf of the A3+, namely Guyana, Sierra Leone, Somalia, and my own country, Algeria, I want to express our deep appreciation to Mr. Pedersen for his tireless efforts in supporting the Syrian people and Syria in overcoming the consequences of a devastating conflict and navigating a most challenging transition period. His professionalism, his commitment, and his dedication have been invaluable throughout this journey, and we wish him all the best. Looking ahead, we hope that the new Special Envoy will bring renewed momentum to the role of the United Nations in Syria and help unite all efforts toward a single objective: support Syria and its people. The A3+ remain fully committed to working with all partners in pursuit of the best interest of Syria and a brighter future for its people. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. The representative of Syrian Arab Republic has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be speaking in English. On December 7th, both Mr. Pedersen and I were together in Doha when we received the news that the regime has fallen. Being a special envoy for any conflict, let alone one that we Syrians know, is no easy job. I think everyone around this council can agree with me on this point. This is perhaps not unique to Syria, but Syria has presented incredible challenges for all the envoys that were bestowed with such a big responsibility. But what perhaps is unique to the Syrian situation in Mr. Envoy's departure is that he departs on a note of hope, on a success story, on a hopeful story, on well wishes for millions of Syrians that he endured so much criticism and so much pressure to be able to serve. I wish him and his family, who I'm sure endured equally as much during that period, all the best. And we look forward, Mr. President, in engaging with the Secretary General and all of you in working with his successor in a way that preserves Syrian sovereignty and fulfills the aspiration of the Syrian people.
I thank the representative of Syrian Arab Republic for the statement. I believe I can express the Council's gratitude for Mr. Pedersen's service during these challenging times. I wish him the very best in his future endeavors. The Council will continue to work with him until the completion of his mission and stands ready to cooperate with his successor in supporting Syria and the Syrian people in their inclusive transition. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers, and the meeting is adjourned.